Today we'll be talking about the impact on the ecosystem. So how do we actually this particular chapter is separated into two main sections on how do we actually affect the ecosystem, and then finally it's the conservation. So human beings will tend to use natural resources every day, and that the use of natural resources must also be controlled and regulated because their depletion will result in the environmental damage, and this is largely irreversible. So for natural resources, what we can see is that it's renewable and can be replaced via natural cycle as long as they are not overused. So some examples are like your air, water, soil, and wildlife. On the other hand, for non-renewable, they cannot be replaced. So once they are actually used, so examples are like your fossil fuel and minerals. So for human activities that could actually damage the environment, so human activities for that such as your industry or your agriculture, um, they actually use natural resources that can lead to deforestation, overfishing, and even pollution. So for deforestation, it refers to the clearing of forests, and that these forests are cleared to make land available for agricultural and or urban development, and that these forests are usually cleared at a faster rate than they can be actually replaced. So we can see that for deforestation, it's really that it's not that you just chop trees only, but mainly when after you have chopped, even if you replant them, they are not able to replace the rate at which it is being removed. So that will lead to deforestation. So for deforestation, what are its effects? It will be initially right. The purpose of the forest there, it helps like a umbrella kind of shape. So it helps to actually protect the soil from actually being wet. Okay, so forests will prevent soil erosion by actually having this very large leafy canopy that protect the topsoil from direct impact of rain, and of course retaining the water in the forest through the absorption of water by our plant roots. So in a area that is deforested, the topsoil will be easily washed away during heavy rain, causing soil erosion. And effects of deforestation can also include flooding, where after rain, right, the topsoil is being washed, and what will happen is all this soil will actually get washed down into the river. And when this soil is being washed into the river, this will inevitably increase the water level of the area lah, and hence it can even cause flooding to take place. Because the thing is, even the soil comes down, right, it doesn't compress the water. The water will still have the same amount of mass and volume. So it will just have to travel somewhere lah. Okay, so what are some of the effects of deforestation? It can lead to desertification. Desertification is different from deforestation. Desertification means the whole area becomes like a desert-like kind of area. So without the leaf canopy, right, the sunlight will actually fall directly onto the ground. So it tends to like heat up and bake the whole land and cause water to evaporate from the ground. This will cause or create a desert-like condition, and it's not suitable for plants to actually grow. Next, we also do see that deforestation will lead to climate changes, where a reduce in plant life can result in less carbon dioxide being removed from the environment or the atmosphere via photosynthesis, and that carbon dioxide is this greenhouse gas. So it traps heat within the Earth's environment and results in warmer climate. The second types of how do we actually affect the ecosystem is that we do practice sometimes uncontrolled fishing practices, and that fish is actually an important food source for humans. As such, as the human population increase, the demand for fish would also increase, and any uncontrolled and unregulated fishing will result can result in a reduce in aquatic biodiversity. So overfishing can actually happen now. So this is where what we deem by overfishing is where, for example, right, the amount of fish being hunted, right, is so much that it's beyond what for human consumption, and of course the rate of the fishes reproducing is definitely lower than how we are actually um, getting the hunting the fishes. So fishing techniques that are also detrimental to the aquatic environment, right, will involve like drench, so it will destroy coral reefs and organisms that live in the seabed. So what happens is drench is like those kind of like scoop, and basically what happens is from the ocean, from the ship, they will actually have this very large scoop that will scoop up whatever that is in the under surface of the ocean, maybe on a surface bed, and this will inevitably destroy even the habitats of the coral reefs, even though the fishermen may not want the coral reefs, they just want to get the oysters and whatnot. Okay. Drift nets and trawlers are another one where you catch marine life indiscriminately. So when we look at drift nets, right, they tend to capture everything as long as it's not small enough to pass through the hole, it gets captured. So some fishes, right, that haven't become big size, right, is being caught in the net, right, they tend to be wasted in this sense. So these are some of the things that we do overfishing. For trawler, it's just imagine a net and then you drag it along the seabed. Yeah, so that's the other example. Okay, there are of course other ways of uncontrolled fishing practice, like for example cyanide fishing, where we use cyanide to actually fish. So cyanide is like a chemical to paralyze the fish. So this cyanide is also very detrimental to coral reefs, in which it will does bleaching and it can even kill them. So it can kill the coral and other reef organisms which act as natural habitats for some of these fishes. So without this habitat, these fishes will be exposed, and then the predator fish will actually hunt them down. Okay, effects of all these uncontrolled fishing practices will lead to destruction of marine habitat, and hence leads to the decrease and extinction of certain fish population. So some ways to generally end um, overfishing can be, government can come out some legislation to control certain areas from maybe fishing boats to come in. So that's one. They can also have some form of regulation to ensure that the net size must be of a certain size, such that the net must be big enough to allow baby fish to escape. So that's another example. It can also limit the number of exports, or it can even limit the number of fishing boats going to certain areas to fish. So these are like controlled area. With improvement in technology, they can also grow fishes within their own country, and at the same time, not tap directly onto the ocean. So these are some examples in which we are controlling. Second thing is also, of course, to ban, like using um, certain like cyanide from fishing, or even use drenches for fishing. So these are generally not allowed or even banned. So these are some examples that efforts can be done to minimize or prevent overfishing. Okay. So pollution is also the process in which the harmful substances, which are your pollutants, are added to the environment, and that water pollution is where we contaminate the water body. Water bodies in this case can be the ocean, can be the river, and so on. And these are usually caused by a few ways lah. For example, the first one is the discharge of untreated sewage into water body. That means, like our after you go to the washroom or the wastewater, or chemical wastewater from industries, right? We actually just don't treat it and just dump it out of the open ocean. So that's an example lah. Untreated sewage. Excessive use of fertilizer and insecticide. So sometimes when you do planting or farming, then rain comes, it wash all this insecticides and fertilizers down into to the river, and this river will lead to the ocean. So these are examples in which not really viable. Then dumping of inorganic waste materials into water bodies as well. That's another example. So over here is an example of the ocean that is made up of quite a few green organisms. So these green organisms are what we call algae. Okay, and the whole process is basically eutrophication. So this algae boom, right, is whereby, right, it will it will initially cover the whole top layer of the ocean. Then when it covers the top layer, right, your aquatic animals or your aquatic plants underneath the ocean, right, do not get sufficient amount of light energy or sunlight to undergo photosynthesis. So these aquatic plants, right, they actually will not be able to undergo photosynthesis, and hence they can undergo respiration. Your whole ocean will then suddenly have a short arc of carbon dioxide and a lack of oxygen. This will then cause the aquatic animals like the fish, right, to die from suffocation. Then when they die, the plants die because they cannot make food. Um, all this will then slowly decompose at the ocean just because of an algae boom lah. Okay, so most harmful algae blooms will flourish under high light condition as well as elevated levels of phosphorus being present. So this phosphorus can come in from dumping from the industries or untreated sewage lah. And stagnant water can also create an environment for algae to flourish. So zebra mussels selectively feed and filter out algae, which will enable all these um, harmful algae blooms to flourish. So the sewage will refer to the waste materials from homes and industries, and that any untreated sewage will may contain disease-causing bacteria, and if discharged into water bodies, could also cause an epidemic, okay, an outbreak of a disease that will also influence the large population of human in a given period. Okay, so eutrophication, as they contain phosphorus and nitrate. So it's also really just to promote the whole algae boom, leading to the death of the aquatic animals and things like this. Chemical fertilizers that contain nitrates and phosphorus are also used to increase crop yield. However, some of these excessive use of fertilizations can lead to eutrophication, where the excess fertilizers, they are washed into the water bodies, to the river, and that the nutrients in the fertilizer will increase the growth of algae and water plants. Slowly, the submerged plants will die due to a lack of organisms, and that bacteria will grow rapidly and use up dissolved uh, oxygen as they decompose the dead plant. So other organisms will also die due to the lack of oxygen. So these are some examples. So environmental biotechnology is one way in which we can be used to treat the sewage. And this refers to the use of biological science to to provide environmentally friendly solutions in reducing pollution. For example, you use water. The used water has to be treated before being removed, and that the usage of microorganisms in such sewage treatment will help to speed up the water treatment processes. So sewage treatment process, you have the sewage is generally channeled into the water reclamation plants. And in this case, right, the sewage will enter the primary settling tank. Heavy solids will then settle to the bottom of the tank and are removed as sludge. The sewage treatment process, you have the partially treated sewage is then transferred to the aeration tank and mixed with bacteria. So aeration is where you actually have oxygen being supplied into the tank, and then the bacteria will break down the organic pollutants into harmless substances. So the liquid is then sent to the final settling tank where the bacteria are removed. So treated sewage is then discharged to the sea. Following this, the slug is then removed from the primary settling tank, okay, and then you will undergo other forms of like filtration, microfiltration, and whatnot. So the sludge will remove from the final settling tank and is then treated in anaerobic digester before being dewatered and disposed into a soil container. So generally, this is how they help to treat the sewage. So some insecticides, such as your DDT, don't worry, in exam you don't have to actually know this spelling. They are inorganic compounds that are non-biodegradable, and that DDT cannot be excreted, and it is stored in fatty tissues of organisms that will consume it. Therefore, DDT can be passed along food chain, leading to bioaccumulation. So what is this bioaccumulation, right? It's where organisms that feed on all these pesticides in small amount will amount to nothing, but eventually when we are the ones that eat all of these small organisms together, right, that contains the harmful material, these will accumulate in our body, and it will eventually lead to like death or what's not. So chemicals that are not excreted but accumulate in the bodies of organisms that consumes them, and these chemicals are also passed along the food chain and become concentrated in the body of the final consumers. And for humans, we tend to be sometimes the final consumers. Okay, not to say that we eat snake and what's not. So what can we do to minimize all this through conservation, right? So human activities, we have actually depleted natural resources, polluting the environment and destroying the wildlife habitat. So these will generally threaten the biodiversity on Earth. And that biodiversity, we are looking at the range of species that is present in a particular ecosystem. So through conservation, the protection and preservation of natural resources in the environment. So what are some reasons for conservation? The first one is like the scientific value. Studies on wildlife will be able to give us insights on human being. The second one is the maintenance of a balanced ecosystem. The third reason for conservation is the maintenance of biodiversity. It helps to prevent extinction of animals and plant species. It also maintains the maintenance of a large gene pool. And this will result in being able to produce a lot of variety of different organisms as well. The economic importance, the rainforests are a source of raw materials for industries, and that in terms of food source, marine life are a major source of human food. This will then eventually lead to the preservation of natural scenic and wildlife, which is another example. And then conservation measures, right? Conservation of forests. So forests can be managed to prevent the adverse effect of deforestation via either the creation of laws to regulate the logging industry, reforestation, the planting of new trees, or even seedlings to prevent or to replace trees that have been destroyed. So that's where we I think in previous years there was this field drive in trying to replant trees and things like this. So designation of lands as forest reserve is another example that you can't do illegal logging or deforestation, and definitely to research to improve quality of forests and making them more productive. Conservation of fishing grounds is another example where fishing grounds can be managed to prevent overfishing and indiscriminately catches all the indiscriminately catching via you can ban the use of drift net, trawlers and drench, like what we shared just now about don't allow adjusting the size of the nets, which is using nets with a certain mesh size so that the younger fishes that are small enough can actually pass through and escape being caught, limiting the number of ships allowed in fishing grounds at any one time, and of course raising endangered species of fishes in hatcheries for release into the sea. And yeah, that's it for this chapter. Okay, you can watch it again to refresh some of the items. Thank you.